Hey everyone, so here I am on East 23rd over by 2nd Ave, and I'm about to be going into the Midtown Republican Club here in Manhattan, and it should be a great event. Going to be a couple of candidates speaking tonight, and it's interesting because, of course, the mainstream news media wants you to think they don't exist, which is definitely why I'm going to be covering this, so that you know what's going on. We try our best, and of course this is only possible because of your like, your share, and of course your subscription. And to my Patreon supporters, I thank you very much for making this possible. We're going to try and get as many candidates and their voices available to you, so you know who you're going to be voting for in this election year.
Maron, again, the next district attorney for Manhattan. Thank you so much, Denise. And thank you to the Midtown Republican Club for the invitation and the chance to speak with everybody here. There's a whole lot to cover, but I definitely want to leave some time for questions afterwards so that we can have a conversation. And hello to the folks at home if anybody's watching on Zoom. Let me start with, I've talked to several rooms at this point of Republicans, so let me start with this. Just so that as I was a defense lawyer for many years, we used to say sometimes you have to get the bad facts out first. This isn't really a bad fact, but it's just the truth. I've been a Republican only very recently. I was a Democrat for 33 years. And the fact is, I don't think I have changed that much, although I have changed, as much as my former party has changed dramatically. And I know I'm not alone. There are a lot of New Yorkers who feel like the leadership that we used to vote for, I certainly used to vote Democrat, has gone galloping off to a sort of radical extremism. And when we talk about issues, many of the issues Jason raised about affordable housing and things that we all care about, and I'm going to talk mostly about public safety, but we have been getting leadership in our city that is not responsive to our everyday concerns and our everyday needs. And one of the things that I think, in order to win this election, in order to defeat Alvin Bragg, we are going to have to have a conversation about some of the policy concerns that unite all of us. The Republicans, the Independents, the Democrats, the folks who vote on the conservative line or the Working Families Party line, or the people who normally don't vote at all in non-presidential years. Because the truth is, public safety is an issue that unites everybody. You really don't, I think Jason alluded to it, but nobody asks you for your party registration if they're gonna, harass you in the subway or hurt you on the street. We really have to have public safety in this city for absolutely everybody. But let me start with a brief introduction of who I am, for those of you who don't know. My name is Maron. I'm running for Manhattan District Attorney, and I am a New Yorker. I was born here on the Upper East Side at Lenox Hill Hospital.
Me too. My sister was born.
It's a good place. And but I grew up mostly outside of the city, came back to New York to attend Barnard College in the late 80s and the early 90s, went to Cardozo Law School, and from law school went directly to work at the Legal Aid Society, where I worked as a defense attorney for many years. I also worked as Legal Aid Society's director of training, where I trained newly hired attorneys in litigation practices as they were starting to work in the courts. And I also worked at Cardozo Law School as an assistant clinical professor of law, also supervising the future attorneys. They were third-year law students as they practiced in criminal court. So I have worked in the very courthouse where the Manhattan District Attorney's office is for over 2 decades. I also worked briefly in the Bronx, in the Bronx Hall of Justice, and we have really, I think a lot of people know here, we've seen major changes in the criminal justice practice over the years. I worked in those courts at a time, nothing's ever perfect, there's always room for improvement, right? And there's always room for improvement in our criminal justice system. But I worked in the courts at a time where we were doing a much better job as a city of administrating the criminal justice system in a way that kept people safe. We have made a lot of changes. People have heard about bail reform, about the discovery law changes, that
you're fine.
even if we all say these changes were made with the best of intentions, even if we credit the folks who made the changes with really good intentions, they've not worked in our city. We've had a multi-year experiment right now with some of these changes, and they haven't made our city less safe. They have made our city less safe, and they haven't made our, in addition to making our city less safe, they haven't answered the needs of populations of people that are terribly needy. We have a mentally ill, homeless situation in this city where instead of using the criminal justice system as a way to compel treatment and to help the people that desperately need help, we have a situation where we are letting people languish in the streets where they become increasingly drug addicted, increasingly dangerous, and increasingly a danger to themselves and others. So the whole panoply of reforms that we've had out of Albany need to be fixed. And one of the things we need in a Manhattan district attorney is someone who will talk about that, someone who will lobby for those changes, and someone who will speak up on behalf of New Yorkers who need those changes so that we can live in as safe a city as possible, because we certainly all deserve that. In addition to my legal work, I am also a mother of 4. I have 4 kids who are all New York City public school students, 1 graduate and 3 current students. 2 of my kids are high schoolers and my youngest is in 3rd grade. I have spent a great deal of time working to improve our public schools. I have been elected many times by Manhattanites who, when they get to know me and know what I stand for, have elected me to the Community Education Council for District 2, which covers this neighborhood and all the Upper East Side down to Battery Park City. And I have worked in the schools and worked not only to improve the education that our public school students get, but I've also worked to flip some of the school seats to people who have common sense approaches to improving our public schools. So I do know a lot about the grassroots effort to get voters together. And the great thing, one of the things I really love about the school board elections is they're not partisan. So people aren't voting party lines. What they're voting for is common sense and people who are proposing good policy ideas to make things better. And that's exactly what we need in a district attorney. A district attorney race, frankly, shouldn't be a partisan race, right? Because we need a district attorney who can call balls and strikes regardless of party. And one of the things we saw with Alvin Bragg's prosecution of our current president is somebody who used the office to advance a very partisan agenda, and that's dangerous and it's wrong and it shouldn't happen. So there are a whole lot of things that we know we need to change, and frankly, we're not alone. Usually, most people don't know who the district attorney is in cities that they don't live in, but it turns out that Americans all over this country know about our district attorney and how bad he is and how much we need to change. I will let you all know that our campaign is already received. We haven't even done our formal launch yet. We're going to be doing that at the end of the month, but we have received donations from all across the country at this point, because a lot of Americans know. And I'm very grateful for that, and thanks to all the people who have done that. But, you know, Americans all over know that New York needs to be a safe city. New York is a major, New York City is, and Manhattan in particular, is a place where not only do we all live here and work here and have our families here, but hundreds of thousands of people come to the city as tourists, internationally and nationally, and support the economy, support restaurants like the Ara Cafe that we're in now, and lots of other wonderful places. And we need, our city really relies on our entertainment industry, our hotel industry, and our restaurant industry relies on those dollars. We need to have a safe city, not just for all of us who live here, but for the fact that we are a thriving tourist destination. Let's see. I do want to leave time for questions, but I guess, and Jason, you did a good job doing this, so I will do this too. You can go to my website, which is maudmaron.com or maudformanhattan.com. They'll both take you to the same place. Unlike Jason's race, I don't have matching funds, but we have very high limits in this race, so you can donate as much money as you want to the race, but any amount helps and is deeply appreciated. You can also sign up on the website, give us your email so that we can keep you updated as to what's going on and for events that are happening. And anyone who wants to volunteer or get involved, we'd love to build that volunteer corps. We have a lot of wonderful people already volunteering, but we're always happy to have more. And of course, really, really important here, make sure you sign the petition. There's petitions circulating tonight. Please sign them tonight if you can. There we go. Jason's holding it up. I will tell you, we haven't had for Manhattan DA sort of a county-wide petition effort like this in a really long time, because Thomas Kniff ran 4 years ago, and Thomas is a great attorney and did a great job, but when he was running, they had lowered all the petition signature requirements because of COVID, so it was much lower. Cy Vance, the previous district attorney, did not have a challenger when he replaced Bob Morgenthau, and Bob Morgenthau started in his job in 1975. So we go really back before, a long time before we had a challenger who was out here trying to get as many signatures as I am. So every signature counts, please do it, and that's an effort that we'd be very happy to have help with. Even though I see the great Bill Perlman over there, who's the great petition signature, who I was out working with over this weekend getting signatures. So that tells you a little bit about the campaign and what we're doing. And I think, Denise, if it's okay with you, I'd like to go to some questions.
Great. Right ahead.
Unless everyone's like, we already know what we want to know, you're great, we'll vote for you, that's it. But if we have any questions, I'd be glad to take them. Oh, yeah, right there.
You mentioned with Barnard.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah. For the folks at home and for anyone who didn't hear, the protests at Barnard, where there were people breaking the law, the property destruction, all sorts of various offenses that were going on, what would I do about that? And for the students who are foreign students, what about cooperating with ICE and immigration and those sort of things? I would back up. First of all, yes, it kind of broke my heart to see the Barnard campus looking like that, to see terrorist sympathizers basically breaking the law and not being held accountable. But I would say that I would back up to across the street at Hamilton Hall some months ago. There were a bunch of students and others, because you don't know if they were all students, because they're all wearing masks. And, you know, that's something that I agree with everyone who's proposed, that we should go back to the absurdity of telling everyone you have to wear a mask all the time, and now people trying to say we have to pass a law to that people can't wear masks. But the keffiyehs that people are wearing on their faces are not to prevent COVID, they're to prevent identification as you break the law, and we should put an end to that. So on the mask law, I would change that. I mean, I can't change it, the legislature has to change it, but I would support those changes very much, and I would advocate for them. But to go back to what I was saying about the Hamilton Hall, when the students broke in, when they were doing the encampments over the summer, folks got arrested, rightly so, because they were breaking the law. And before the police could even finish prosecuting the paperwork on those arrests, Alvin Bragg had dismissed their cases. And in doing so, he has his excuses, it was too hard to prosecute, or for this, that, or the other reason, but how do you know it was hard to prosecute? You didn't even try. There wasn't even an assigned ADA on the case, right? They barely got out of ECAB, and it was like they went through arraignments, and then, he was dismissing the cases. So I think it's really clear that his failure to prosecute those cases was a big sign that this is okay, you can do this, you're going to get away with it, and it won't be a problem. So he was the assist to the current, the violence and the lawlessness that we're seeing on the Barnard campus. And I think that's one of the many, many reasons we have to get rid of him. You should absolutely be prosecuting that kind of lawlessness on our college campuses. And I 100% do not think that foreign students should come here and get the extraordinary amount of financial aid and support and privilege of being on an American college campus just so that they can break the law, target Jewish students, harass other students from all over this country that are paying to get an education, and break numerous laws. They should be arrested and they should be prosecuted. Mhm. Yes.
So instead of just saying bail, you had to stop at the front and start working on this actually. Which aspect of this?
Right. So the question was that there was a series of different laws, and and in fact, not only were changes to, and what would I do with this? First of all, what I have as a future DA would be a bully pulpit. It's really in Albany, our legislators who need to change those laws. There is the bail reform law, which changed what you're allowed to set bail on. There's a law called less is more, which is a change to the parole laws and what constitutes parole violations and the levels of proof needed to detain people when they're in violation of their parole status. There is also a raise the age law, which changed the way you can prosecute people who are under the age 18 who would have otherwise be prosecuted as adults in Supreme Court for certain designated felonies. And there are the changes to the discovery. I was discussing this with somebody earlier. They all need to change. And what we've had, and it's so clear that we need changes in these laws that we've had two different, what I call tinkerings, right? They call it reforms or fixes. They didn't fix the law, they tinkered with the laws on the edges, because Kathy Hochul likes to say, oh, we fixed the problem, but they tinkered because the law is so bad that they needed to make some concession to how bad it was to people. But I was talking with Jim Quinn, who was the Queens DA for 42 years, and knows an extraordinary amount about being a good district attorney and about the way the criminal law works in New York. And he said, he put it very plainly to me of like, it worked beforehand. We need to go back to the way it was before, and I think he's right. So I don't think we need to say which more incremental tinkering can we do. I think we have to go back to a place where judges have discretion to set bail on cases that they now can't set bail on. Reasonable people can disagree about something like the dangerousness standard. Right, in New York, the reason you set bail is based solely on whether or not someone is a flight risk. It's like, is this person going to come back to court or not? And in other jurisdictions, they allow judges to consider other things beyond that, which are always informally considered anyway, but technically on the law, it's a flight risk status only. I think we should absolutely give judges more discretion at this point, because what we have in this city is a crisis of recidivism. We have a fairly small number of people that commit the largest number of crimes in our city, particularly around certain issues like retail theft. The people that are going in, that make it impossible for us to go buy a toothbrush without having someone unlock a door, it's not the majority of our city, it's not even a big minority of our city, it's a small concentrated group of recidivists that we need, that are not a mystery to us. We know who they are, and we should be able to prosecute them more fully. We can under existing laws, and we should change. The district attorney should absolutely work hand in glove with the legislators who know the law should be changed, and work to bring over other legislators to make it clear that that's what our communities need. who wants to talk about having a safer city. But to your point, the business interests matter. New York City is first or second in the nation right now in, outgoing migration. We have people leaving, and it started a few years ago, and it hasn't abated. We have people leaving our city. There could be multiple reasons why people leave New York State, leave New York City. Public safety is absolutely one of those reasons. Yeah.
President Trump has a little bit of interest in drawing out WNBA, perhaps. Have you reached out to any of his fundraising groups?
I've talked to lots of folks who are in the federal administration, who are in the state party, and who are in the city party. Right now, we're really focused on getting on the ballot, but yes to all of that. Like, there are so many different interests, from local community interests to business interests to the coordination between borough, city, state, and federal entities that want to see a new DA in Manhattan. I think you're 100% right that there are a lot of people who are, and also to your language about being moderate. I think there are a lot of really moderate New Yorkers who are either define themselves as center left or center right, but really center is the important thing. We have a lot of people who want some common sense policies to make our city safer. And I'll take any introductions you have. Yes, in the back.
It's a given that right now, New York State and New York City are considered sanctuaries, violating immigration law in the United States. We've seen that Pam Bondi has targeted our city and our state, and I'm wondering, how would you approach the separation between what we're hearing from state and city level authorities and the federal government on the issue of illegal immigration?
On the issue of
Illegal immigration.
Oh, well, look, I think we'd say, yeah, sure. The issue of sanctuary city laws and immigration, and the fact that we have a new federal administration, Pam Bondi, and folks who are looking very differently at this migrant issue and immigration issue. I know that was a loose translation of what you said. Look, I think we see it in our current mayor, right? Eric Adams, if you go back to what he was saying a few years ago, we're a sanctuary city and we're open for everybody and we want everybody here. That was a bad idea then, and it's a bad idea now, because our city cannot sustain the expense, and the public safety implications of that policy are hugely apparent to everybody, including the man who kept screaming about being a sanctuary city, Eric Adams, because now he's singing a very, very different tune. He's finally saying what so many of us knew, that this is not a sustainable policy. It is entirely okay to be a sympathetic New Yorker, that true asylum seekers, our nation has always been a home to true asylum seekers, but what we're getting right now are not true asylum seekers. When you see those pictures of the open southern border and know that even though that's kind of far away from us, it's directly impacting the budget of the city and the safety of these citizens, I'm going to go to you, that I think we have to work with the federal government, who is at this point recognizing the severity of the problem and doing what they can to address it, and we need to be good partners to address that. Go ahead.
Last February, I was in the JD Sports store. A 15-year-old illegal migrant, Jose Ramos Figueroa, pulled a gun, a legal handgun, out of his backpack right in front of all of us. I was just on by some stupid crime. He shot a lady in the leg. Then he comes outside, and the police officers were coming to apprehend him, and he started shooting at the police officer. He got away.
Right.
He is now in federal custody because federal marshals were brought in to get him. Okay, maybe that's the solution. I know you don't want to turn this into a police thing, but they're out there. There are 300,000 illegal migrants still in this city.
Right.
Okay, and they're out there, and they are heavily armed. I talked to police officers at the Row Hotel, telling me they were taking an average of 6 handguns a day out of the Row Hotel. So, I moved to Naples, Florida. I still own a business here. When I come back here, I don't go out at night. And that's why I came here tonight, because I thought maybe we have a solution.
Right, and I wanted, so the folks here, you spoke well loudly, so I
The
think.
solution is law and order.
Yeah.
And when we're elected into office, we'll bring law and order
That's
back
why
to
we're
the
here.
city.
We need is the right people.
All right, thanks. Thanks, guys. I know.
That is a federal
Yes.
offense. If it wasn't for the federal marshal, Jose Velasquez would still be
Right.
out.
So I want the story, and for those who didn't hear it, in terms of someone pulling a gun in a store, shooting a woman, and then going outside and shooting at police officers who are coming to apprehend him. It brings up a couple of things, what I just said in the last answer about the need to cooperate with the federal government to deal with some of the real entrenched criminality that's in some of the migrant shelters, but also, had that person been a U.S. citizen as a 15-year-old, some of the laws we were just talking about, like the raise the age law and the bail reform laws, make it more difficult for the district attorney right now to prosecute those cases as there should be. I really do believe that both prosecutors should have flexibility in terms of how to dispose of cases, and judges should have the discretion in how to set bail in certain cases. But the way the law is written right now, it would change from how it used to be before the raise the age law for a U.S. Citizen who is doing who's engaging in that kind of criminality and that kind of gun case. I used to represent teenagers, young people who had gun charges all the time, and it was almost impossible to not have bail set and to get a non-prison sentence or a non-incarceratory sentence. As a defense lawyer, you would be pleading to try to get your client what we call the Rikers year, which meant you would plead guilty to an offense that would allow you to be housed in Rikers Island, sentenced for 1 year in Rikers Island, on which you would serve about 8 months' time. Because the alternative was always prison, right? Having a gun meant, if the prosecution could prove the case, that you were going to prison. That is no longer the case. We have kids who don't have bail, who are caught with a gun, loaded gun, operable gun, who are getting programs, who are flunking out of those programs and getting new programs. The alternative to incarceration program system, again, is the sort of thing that comes from a good place. There are people who can benefit from those programs and maybe shouldn't be in jail. But what they have turned into is get out of jail free cards for a whole class of criminal that we absolutely will see more of under Alvin Bragg. And so that question not only addresses the importance of working with the federal law enforcement, but to know that it also implicates the decisions that we have to make about those laws that we talked about before. Over here.
I'm going to your campus facilities to demonstrate against the board chancellor. A lot of people probably don't know that he tried to get rid of you. You went to court, won, perhaps shed some light to what you did.
Sure.
Besides criminality of people who are sound mind and body, we basically have people who are going around who are not mentally ill, and both they're saying for the sake of their neighbors and families and friends and the rest of us, they need to be committed. How do we make it so that it's easier to commit people who literally cannot live?
Right. I'll do the second part first and then go back to the first part. It's CPL 730, Criminal Procedure Law 730 is the criminal procedure law that would allow a prosecutor, defense lawyers can do it too, to ask for a fitness exam for their client, right? Because some people are not fit to even stand trial, and you need to have the ability to do an assessment, an inpatient assessment of somebody's mental health in a lot of these cases. And what we have now with Alvin Bragg, so you don't have to change any laws to do that right now. A district attorney who wanted to make sure that people who are mentally ill, who are a danger to themselves or others, that you can order exams and you can initiate that process right now. We don't have to change the laws to do it. But what we have now is a DA in Alvin Bragg who has this philosophy that the way he sometimes describes it is as light a touch as possible. It's this idea that it stems from this idea that the police are all racist and the system is all rigged against the people who are being arrested, so they always want to have as little interaction as possible. But with people who are deeply mentally ill, That's not the solution. People absolutely need intervention, and if you think about the Daniel Penny trial, where Jordan Neely was the person on the subway that Daniel Penny was trying to restrain. Jordan Neely, the young man, he had been in and out of that system many times, including on violent felonies, where they could have used that system to be, you have a carrot and a stick possibility when you're using the criminal law to get mentally ill people to a place that's a better place for them than being, psychotic and dangerous on the subways. And they just didn't do it, right? They didn't do it because they were operating under this philosophy that the best thing to do is leave those folks alone. Not only does it make people on the subway, endangered because these folks can be violent, it's not fair to the mentally ill person. It is not compassionate to the mentally ill person who is not getting the help that they need on the streets. So there are things that we can do right now, and if we invest in the idea that the criminal justice system can help some of these people instead of this wrong-headed notion that the best thing we can do is leave them alone and step away, we can help a lot more people while making the rest of us safe at the same time. And now, thank you for asking me about my favorite thing, which is First Amendment free speech issues. As I mentioned before, I've been elected by folks in Manhattan to the Community Education Council, which is like a school board. And I do what I always do, which is speak up and say what I believe in, say my mind. I fought really hard to protect the specialized high schools from Bill de Blasio's effort to get rid of them. I have fought for a high level of, academic quality in our public schools. I also spoke up really, really strongly against two things that are related to this conversation. One is boys and girls sports. I think girls sports are for girls. I have a daughter who's a junior in high school, and she's a track athlete, and she loves her sport, and she works really hard at it. And when she's competing on the girls' team, I think she should be competing against girls, and that is not discriminatory. So and here's the thing. We're in the super blue borough, and we're in the very blue city, and I was on my education council, and I wrote this resolution, and I didn't know if I was going to get it passed or not, but I knew it was the right thing to do, and it passed 8-3, because lots of people who are on my council, almost all of whom are Democrats, agreed with that, like we all agreed here. So I tell you that as an important little bit of background, because then I was asked to comment by the New York Post about some particularly virulent anti-Semitism that was happening in the schools, and I called it out and said how awful it was that I thought to have that kind of anti-Semitic, Hamas supporting propaganda in our kids' schools, and the chancellor, former chancellor, Chancellor Banks, removed me from the school board, saying that I was bullying a student. I was doing no such thing, and I've never bullied a student, and I never would. And in fact, the student he was referring to was someone who had written in an op-ed anonymously. So I don't know how you can bully a person when you don't know who they are. And my daughter goes to a school that has thousands of kids in it. So he removed me. Every newspaper that covered the story of that removal mentioned my position on boys and girls sports, because everybody knew, from Chalk Beat, which is a very left-wing newspaper, to the New York Times, to the Daily News, they all said, Miss Maron, who has been, engaging in transphobic behavior and all the other things they say about common sense positions around this issue, was removed by the chancellor because of her sort of offensive positions. The good part of this story is we were in federal court, myself and two other co-plaintiffs, challenging a speech code that they had implemented for elected parents. The judge that restored me to my seat was an Obama-nominated federal judge in Brooklyn who won a preliminary injunction that restored me to my seat on the very same day that the FBI raided Chancellor Banks' home as part of the ongoing corruption scandal. I always have to mention that part. I am an absolute free speech First Amendment believer, and I will say, as somebody who used to hold the ACLU in enormously high esteem, find it enormously frustrating to watch the ACLU pretend that misgendering someone is violence, when in fact you can call a man and there's nothing violent about that. So thank you for asking me about that, because it's a good memory for me. That was a good day when we won that part of the case.
But they have a hard time. They've been for 2 years, 3 years. And one of my friends even told me my tenant has not paid for 6 years.
Thank you for asking that question, asking about small landlords and tenants and eviction problems. I did run for city council in 2021 and I talked to a lot of small landlords because it impacts a lot of small landlords in Chinatown and also throughout the lower part of Manhattan where I live. It is part of the same failed ideas. And again, I'll go back to, you can just think it's the worst ideologies and ideas ever, or you can say, oh, the people who made it really hard to evict folks were doing it out of, you can credit them with good intentions. But the reality is what happens when you bankrupt small landlords, the big conglomerate real estate companies can come in and buy up depressed property values, and it is the least progressive, least smart thing to do to small property owners to put on them this burden of not being able to evict a non-payer out of several years. It's just not sensible, it's not reasonable. I unfortunately can't change it now, or even if I was a district attorney, but I would always support, and let me say this, I'd always support politicians who, let me just finish, I would always support politicians who want to help small tenants and landlords in the situation, but I also really think one of the reasons it's so great to see the Midtown Republican Club here now is because what we've been missing in the city for a long time is a true contest of ideas, right? Because we have a one-party rule where it's like, how left can you go is the conversation that you have to have at the polls. And what we should have is a conversation about who's got the best ideas, which party is giving us the best ideas. Yeah. And so I think it's just incredibly important to have a vibrant two-party system so that every Democratic, right now we have every Democratic elected in our city says, I'm afraid of being primaried from the left, so I'm going to move a little more to the left. And then we keep moving to the left and to the left and to the left with some of these bad ideas. What we need to do is have the conversation that our whole country just had, which is who has the best idea to protect our border, to improve our economy, to make our city and our countries more vibrant and safer and really put us in the right direction. Yeah. By marginalized communities, do you mean Black folks and Latino folks and Asian folks? Is that a racial question? Okay, good, because I think it's a totally legitimate question, but I just like to, say things accurately. The reality is this: have you ever heard of a guy named Roland Fryer?
Yes.
He's an academic out of Harvard who did a lot of research. If you there was a time, like around 2019 and 2020, when the sort of BLM movement was at its apex, where if you ask people how many unarmed Black men are killed by the police in a year, they would tell you thousands. Of course, that's not true, right? The number is less than a dozen in most years. So you don't want to ever see anybody, killed by police action that's gone wrong. But the fact is, we've had this notion that that policing is this big danger to what folks call marginalized communities, often to young Black men. But the truth is, in cities where you've seen a big, the Michael Brown hands up, don't shoot, and that whole case brought us like federal investigations and federal reports. When you have those cases that are really high profile, and the police pull back from policing because they're under all this national attention, the crime rate goes up. And what happens when the crime rate goes up? Which communities are hurt the most and suffer the most, right? Yeah, absolutely. It's the minority communities. And it's communities that can't, that can least afford that steep rise in crime. And I think if you were talking to folks in Harlem, they can tell you that. There never was widespread support for the defund the police movement in Black and Latino communities in this city. There were a lot of talking heads that would like to tell you that there was, but it's not true. And it is also true that under policing and decreased policing hurts minority communities first and worst, and it is not in any way anti-racist to have white liberals supporting policies that hurt poor Black communities. That's what I would say. Sure.
Making sure. Where did you get elected? Your deal before it gets to the seniors, and what do you think before you
I gotta learn a lot more about the casino question because I don't know a whole lot about it. So I'll put that on my list of things to learn a little bit more about. Okay.
I'm wonderful, and I want to see it.
Yeah, but this is Manhattan.
I'll say thank you for running, because last time I went to vote, there was 8 Democrats, not one, anything else. So I walked out, I said to the guy, what type of election is this? There's 8 Democrats, no opposition, so thank you for finally everybody waking up. But as far as marginalized communities, this is a marginalized community. The people over 55 who have to live in this city of filth and crime. Every morning there's people laying out here drunk, messed up, mentally ill, they need help, right here on this street. So this is a marginalized community, and common sense is what we need to wake up and all this
Absolutely.
crap about
love it.
the community. This
Yeah.
is a community that needs help.
I know.
Make no sense, man.
We're right about that. We have communities everywhere in this city that need the help, and the reality is, as a homeowner, I pay more and get less now. I pay more in real estate taxes, and my streets are dirtier, and my subways are less safe, and that, we all know what that's like, and it's certainly not acceptable, and we're gonna have to vote our way out of it, and in order to do that, we need candidates to vote for.
We're afraid to go out at night when the sun goes down. We lock our door and we stay in.
Right.
We watch your back, even the daytime. Everybody coming at you.
But
We need police. We
I hear
need
you.
law and order. There's no law and order.
Well, you have
I
to.
agree with you.
You have to
We
vote
need-
for us November 4th,
We will,
2025.
we will.
And we'll
Go
make
ahead.
it happen.
I don't see anybody else, right? I have 2 questions that folks have already asked, so you go first and then you go and we'll.
All of them have executive directors with mid-size Just basically, the drummer should be on.
Yes, I'm aware. It's a great question, and the fact is, I think, like I said, I've been a defense lawyer in the past, but I've certainly worked with the assistant district attorneys a great deal, in opposition sometimes, but you also talk to people, and there are rackets investigators and district attorneys that would love to investigate the extreme graft and corruption that's going on in some of those organizations you mentioned. What they need is a boss who will tell them to do it, and I certainly would.
This is a question for both you and also Jason, since we have the opportunity to hear from both of you at this time. The AG sets the tone for many police officers, many departments, in what they should be prosecuting or what they should be, arresting and enforcing the law. Some things become priorities based on your direction. So my question to you would be, what would be the number one priority if you were to be elected to direct towards law enforcement?
Yeah. It's hard to come up with just one because there's so much that needs to be done. But I would
Fair.
say that right now we need to go back to what we have with Alvin Bragg is numbers that are really startling in terms of the decline to prosecute and the reduction from felony to misdemeanor. We have to reverse those numbers. He has instituted a policy of sort of non-prosecution wherever you can possibly not prosecute. And those numbers, and that includes, by the way, anything that's discretionary in arrests, So we have officers who are being told not to arrest people, give a desk appearance ticket where you can, even if you could make an arrest. And I really think that police saw in the city. We have seen the ups and downs and the cycles of crime, and we know that some version of broken windows works. You can argue about whether what was good about it and what was bad about it. And I think reasonable people might say that we didn't get everything right, but some version of that policing for the smaller crimes to prevent the larger crimes absolutely does work, and I think we need to get back to that, and that would be, I think, the place to start. Jason, you want to give your answer?
No Soundbites Allowed is a podcast hosted by Michael Vass. The podcast focuses on providing in-depth discussions on various political and social issues. As the title suggests, the aim is to go beyond quick sound bites and explore topics in greater detail. Michael Vass, the host, engages with guests to analyze and discuss current events, policies, and political ideologies. The live stream and videos cover a wide range of subjects, including politics, economics, social issues, and more. By delving into longer, more comprehensive conversations, No Soundbites Allowed aims to provide listeners with a deeper understanding of the complexities surrounding contemporary issues. AI is listening. Shouldn't you know what AI knows? Aren't you tired of being treated like a child by major media parrots and want to be respected as an adult? There is nothing to lose and a lot to potentially gain, so check out No Soundbites Allowed on all major social media platforms.